Men that usually say, oh, my ex doesn't allow me to see my child, all that kind of stuff. Sorry to break it to you, but they're usually quite narcissistic, right? And they prey on your empathy, because as soon as they say that, they know that it's going to garner empathy from you, right? But I'm telling you from experience, most of those men are narcissistic, right? And they're not giving you the full picture, right? If you did a study, right, on, I don't know, 80 cases, right? And let's say 80 of those men were not allowed to see, or were being prevented from seeing their child by their ex, right? You will see about 90% of those cases, there's a valid reason, right? I'm not just talking for talking's sake, I'm talking from experience, right? In the family court, 90% of cases involve domestic violence, right? And why do people usually go to the family court? They go to the family court because they are seeking communication with their child. They are seeking to have access to their child. So the other parent has prevented them from accessing their child. So family court is almost like the last resort, so you get legal intervention to, bring back that communication or whatever, right? Or that access to your child. But like I just mentioned, 90% of cases, this is what they don't tell you, 90%, this can all be found on the .gov UK website. 90% of cases involve domestic violence. Now, let me tell you this. When we look at the context of violence, right? Violence is a form of abuse. But before violence comes into play, there's other forms of abuse that take place, right? And then the abuser, because they are not getting their way or to reinstate the control that they have, they now resort to violence, right? So, any woman in her right mind that's been with a violent person, right, would not allow them access to their child without supervised, at bare minimum, supervised, right? Supervised visitation. And even at that, sometimes it's not even necessary, because if we go down to the detail of it, a violent, abusive person can never be a good parent, right? Because they haven't learned how to manage their emotions. And if they have not learned how to manage their emotions, you're putting a child in a situation that could be potentially volatile. Right. Now, around 2018, 2019, there was a woman called Claire Fossall. You can Google it. And her 2 children were killed during visitation with the father. No, it wasn't supervised visitation with the ex-husband. She already had evidence from police reports that this man said he was going to kill her. There was already evidence and history of domestic abuse. And then he went to the family court and pleaded that he needed to have access to his children. Rightly so. And they gave him access to his children unsupervised. And she kept telling the courts that this supervision, this visitation is very risky, right? Well, what eventually happened, he eventually ended up killing the children. He burnt, put the house on fire, and the children died in the fire, right? They gave this woman an OBE. What is an OBE? When, this could have been preventable. So when I tell you that an abusive person can never be a good parent, you don't need to wait for tragedy to happen or to occur to know that, there is a possible occurrence of danger. It's a risk, putting children with abusers, because if they don't physically abuse them, they will mentally and emotionally and psychologically abuse them, right? And then we're going to go to the final point, because I know somebody will be asked a silly question such as, oh, so why would they marry an abuser? Why would they have children with an abuser? Many abusers, I would say all abusers, are narcissistic, right? So therefore, if you've studied anything about narcissism, you would know that if somebody's an abusive person and a narcissist, they would never reveal it to you. You will never see an abusive side of a narcissist until you're in their web. They are too smart for that, because naturally, right, nobody, no woman will give someone access to them knowing that they are violent. And that is why you will see in some cases men being very defensive of men that don't get to access their children, because they're like, that woman is so wicked, that man is such a nice man. That's to tell you that they're not easily detectable. You have to be a very close proximity to such person, and I'm talking about usually intimately, for you to be able to really decipher their character. Because you see, the quiet people, those people that you think are so calm, they can be the most violent ones, right? So, of course, there might be a handful of cases where it's so obvious that the person is a violent person. Maybe he had a history of violence, and he's like, I don't know, a gang member, whatever, right? That is different. We are talking about men that go to work, that are professionals, that have jobs, that look after their families, that have a level of status that you would never think are violent, right? But you would never think they are abusive. And much more men are more abusive than you think. The average man has a potential to be abusive. He might not be violent, but there'll be sometimes elements of abuse. And they always say that the psychological and emotional abuse is even worse. How do you even detect that when you don't even know the red flags? Because we always talk about red flags. Red flags comes from education and awareness. Red flags come from experience. You can't know red flags until you know what red flags are. Because somebody taking you out, buying you shopping, being so nice, so calm, doesn't look like a red flag for someone who is naive and inexperienced. But potentially that person could be an abusive person. You just don't know. And sometimes it takes a couple of years for it to play out, or when the person thinks that they have secured the person, maybe because they're now married to them, or because they've now had children with them and they think it's harder for the person to go. So now display their true character and motive. So the next time you feel sorry for someone that cannot have access to their children, well, That's your opportunity, if you care so much, to do your research. Clare's Law exists so you can do your research on abusers. You can see if there's a history of of abuse with that particular person, because there's no smoke without fire. And a lot of the times, there is elements of safety concern for the other parent. I know some people think, yeah, but some people are malicious, some people are this. It's a very small number of people that act that way. You may think that, but because a lot of these narcissists, what they do is they use stereotypes, right, that are easily believable. They use gender stereotypes. They use racial stereotypes, right? So if it's a black woman, for example, he might say, you know how they are, when they end a relationship, they, or a marriage or whatever, they always use their children as a weapon. And you might have personally experienced that within your family or somebody's story, right? And they know that. So that will make you be more inclined to believe what they're saying. They use a lot of gender and racial stereotypes that are easily believable, and you guys are the most gullible because you think the narcissist victim is gullible. You ain't seen the flying monkeys. You ain't seen the people that believe the narcissist. They're the most gullible. They will make out stories that they know is naturally believable. Like they'll make up stories like, she's jealous of my new partner. And bear in mind, the person that has never even seen the partner, doesn't even know the partner exists. But they know that you'll believe such because they know that you're naturally inclined to think that women are jealous. Not knowing is a safeguarding concern because of their abuse or violence. If you look at the context of violence is about control, and underlying is abusive, right? So why would you want to have somebody that has not addressed their abusive behavior to have access to your child at such a tender age where children are absorbing traits from what they see, and you allow that person to have access without your presence, where at least your presence, where you can kind of dictate, what they see and what they don't see. Part of being a parent and part of being a mother is about safeguarding, right? I was reading a story the other day, and this woman was saying that her child was essayed, sexually assaulted by the father. The child was about 3 or 4 years old, right? And this must have been during a visit or something, because the only reason she noticed, because when the child came back, the child had scars on her face. So she just thought, oh my God, why has the child got scars on her face? So she took her to the hospital and all that kind of stuff. But later to discover the child had been essayed, and they don't even know how many times this has been happening. Right? So obviously the child is so traumatized, 3 or 4, right? And can you believe the courts has made an order for supervised visits with the father, with that child? Why should the child have access to a parent that has essayed them? I don't care if it's supervised or not supervised. That means you're not acknowledging the child as a victim, right? And you're not safeguarding even that child's mental, the child's psyche, because you don't even know what can trigger in the child every time they have to see that parent. You're re-traumatizing the child, and you have to understand that a lot of the times the courts don't do what's in the best interest of the child. Forget about the parents. They don't even look at what's in the best interest of the child. They don't see the child as an object. not as an actual human being. Because if that child was like a woman, you wouldn't force a woman who had been essayed, right, to have for her abuser, her, to have access to her. But because this is a child, you think it's okay. Why? So fundamentally, as much as they say there's children's rights and this and this and that, there is not. Because a lot of the time the courts believe that a child, if they're under, I think, certain age like 12, they don't have the reasoning capabilities to be able to determine what they want. But you would think that common sense will come into play, that this child is a victim. So a lot of the times, don't listen to what these men tell you when they say they don't have access to their children, because a lot of the times these men will not tell you what they've done. They will not tell you they've essayed their child. They will not tell you that they abused their child. They will not tell you they've abused the mother. And let me tell you one thing. If you abuse me, you can't have access to my child. If you abuse me, what makes you think that me in my right mind, I will feel safe for you to have access to my child? No way. Any woman, any mother that does that, she's out of her senses. But those are the women that they praise. And like I said, parenting is mainly about safeguarding. If you have failed to safeguard your children, you have failed. I don't even allow family members to access my child willingly. Why would I allow abuser? Because it's the parent? It doesn't matter. An abuser is an abuser.